How long would you have to be ill before you began to think you were being poisoned? For Michael Wallace and David Castor, it took too long to deduce what was happening to them, and in the end, they paid with their lives. In today's video, we'll be looking into the case of Stacy Castor, a woman who nearly sent her own daughter to the grave in order to save her skin. Stacy Daniels had an average childhood as the daughter of Jerry and Judy Daniels. Born on July 24, 1967, she grew up showing above-average levels of intelligence and had even expressed an interest in joining law enforcement in some manner, which, to be fair, she would eventually involve herself in the law, although probably not in the way she intended. 17 years later, in 1985, she met a man named Michael Wallace while still in high school, and the two quickly became very close. By 1988, the two had gotten married and had their first child, an adorable daughter named Ashley. And just a few short years later, in 1991, they had a second daughter named Bree. Now, these high school sweethearts weren't as perfect as they appeared at face value. While both Michael and Stacy worked as a mechanic and an ambulance dispatcher respectively, the family didn't have much money, and the two were barely scraping by hand, providing for themselves and their children. Not only did they have money problems, but Michael had an issue with drugs and alcohol that weighed heavily on his and Stacy's marriage. When this paired with the fact that Stacy heavily suspected Michael was cheating on her with several other women, it became evident to everyone that their marriage was soon coming to a close. By the end of 1999, just over 10 years after they had originally gotten married, Stacy was planning on getting divorce lawyers involved. However, with Christmas and New Year's rapidly closing, she decided to put her feelings aside for a few more months in order to give her children one more holiday season as a family. Around the same time, and seemingly unrelated to the decline in their marriage, Michael soon began to have a rapid decline in health. He was constantly coughing and swollen, with several family members later recalling that he seemed shaky and unsteady on his feet. The holidays came and went, and after seeing the poor state Michael was in, his extended family insisted he go see a doctor and finally got a diagnosis for the mysterious illness that had suddenly befallen him. Unfortunately, Michael would never get around to discovering what was wrong with him, as he would be found dead on the living room couch in the Wallaces of his home on January 11, 2000. Michael was only 38 years old at the time, which would make him quite young to have died of a heart attack. However, that was the first and most plausible conclusion that doctors jumped to. Michael's sister was suspicious of her brother's death and requested to have an autopsy done. But when doctors brought this up to Stacy, she refused, citing that she believed the doctor's theory and saw no reason to look into the death further. Not seeing anything suspicious, with this the doctors moved on and Michael was promptly buried, leaving behind a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old daughter, as well as a wife who had seemingly already moved on from her husband's sudden passing. Stacy collected $50,000 in life insurance from Michael's death and took her daughters to Disneyland before carrying on with life. In August of 2003, Stacy married another man by the name of David Castor, who owned his own company. The two of them bonded over the fact that they had each been married before and had each had children from those previous marriages. As with any relationship, their marriage wasn't perfect. Reportedly, Michael didn't get along super well with Stacy's two daughters. However, the family made do and things seemed to be relatively well for the family. That was until 2 years later, in August of 2005, when Stacy and David were planning what to do for their 2-year anniversary, and David suggested that they take a 2-week vacation away from both of their kids in order to get some alone time. Stacy was adamantly against leaving her kids alone for 2 weeks, and somehow this devolved into a heated 7-hour argument that ended with David taking a bottle of whiskey and locking himself in the couple's bedroom. A few days later, after this argument, 911 received a phone call from Stacy regarding her husband's well-being. In the call, she stated that her husband didn't show up for work that day and that she hadn't seen or talked to him since 5 o'clock Sunday, and that she was afraid he might have done something dangerous to himself while locked in their bedroom. Officers arrived on scene to help and force their way through the locked bedroom door, where they were met with the sight of David Castor unalive, lying in his birthday suit and face down on the bed. The police quickly investigated the bedroom for any pieces of evidence that could explain David's death. In the room, they found the bottle of whiskey he had brought with him, a bottle of cranberry juice, a cup by the bedside table that was full of what appeared to be an almost fluorescent green liquid, and partially hidden under the bed was the damning evidence that pushed the police to investigate further. A bottle of antifreeze lying on its side on the floor with the cap off. It wasn't much longer until an officer also discovered a turkey baster in the trash can that smelled of both alcohol and antifreeze. Some officers jumped to the conclusion that David had chosen to take his own life by drinking antifreeze, and Stacy backed up this theory by saying that David was going through a lot of troubles in life, including the fact that his own father had recently passed. However, not only is that a super uncommon way for someone to end themselves, but it's also an incredibly brutal and painful way to go. In fact, why would he choose to do that when there was a shotgun under the bed that would provide a much less painful and drawn-out method? When other interviewed family members and friends of David contradicted Stacy's story by saying it was very odd and out of character for David to do that, the police dug a little bit deeper into this apparent grieving wife. When they found out that Stacy had another husband who passed away from an apparent heart attack, they decided not to rule David's death an offing himself type until after a thorough investigation. Soon after, the police began to send off their evidence for lab analysis, and soon found that the glass of the mysterious green liquid, which was soon determined to be antifreeze, had Stacy's fingerprints on the bottom of the cup, as though she was holding the bottom of the cup and encouraging someone to drink from it. According to statements made to police by Stacy, she hadn't been in the bedroom for a few days, so how were her fingerprints on this glass of antifreeze? Testing from the turkey baser also revealed that it held a mixture of alcohol and antifreeze, as well as some of David's own DNA at the top of the baser, as though it had been in his mouth. However, his fingerprints could not be found anywhere else on the baser, making it unlikely that had been used to poison himself as Stacy was claiming he did. Police also soon discovered that David's recently written will left everything he owned, including his business, to Stacy and her daughters, weirdly excluding David's own flesh and blood son with whom he had a healthy relationship. Putting together the pieces about what likely happened to David, investigators decided to turn back to the case of Michael Wallace and had his body exhumed with the intent of autopsying him. During the autopsy, they found small crystals in his body that was the result of his body absorbing antifreeze. With the evidence stacking up against her, the police decided they needed to re-interview Stacy. On the bedside table next to David's body was a glass of antifreeze, an empty glass, and an open bottle of cranberry juice. The detectives asked Stacy if she remembered which glass she poured the cranberry juice in, to which she, honest to God, replied, "Well, when I poured the cranberry juice." By this point, the police had basically caught her red-handed. The police, undeterred by Stacy's silence, persisted in their investigation, determined to uncover the truth. They embarked on a quest to find Stacy's daughter, Ashley. Armed with the knowledge that she had recently started college, they set out to track her down, their resolve unwavering in the face of adversity. After painstakingly following every lead, the police finally located Ashley at her college campus. With a sense of urgency driving them forward, they approached her, ready to reveal the shocking truth that had been buried for so long. The police explained the grim details of the investigation, their words painting a chilling picture of betrayal and deception. Unable to contain her emotions, Ashley dialed her mother's number, her fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Stacy answered the call, her voice laced with faint concern as she listened to Ashley's distress. "How dare the police harass you?" Stacy exclaimed, her words dripping with false indignation. "But life is hard. Let's have a drink when you get home." Despite the turmoil swirling within her, Ashley agreed. When Ashley returned home, Stacy greeted her with a smile, offering her daughter a drink as promised. But as Ashley took a sip, Ashley found herself drifting into unconsciousness, her body succumbing to the effects of the toxic concoction her mother had prepared. The next morning, Ashley's sister discovered her in bed, barely breathing. Panicked, she rushed to alert their mother, who wasted no time in calling 911. At the hospital, Ashley's life hung in the balance as doctors fought to save her. And when she finally regained consciousness, the police were there, ready to uncover the truth. They showed Ashley the offing herself note that had been found at the scene, its contents implicating her in the deaths of her father and stepfather. But Ashley's shock was palpable as she denied any involvement, insisting that she had never written such a thing. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It soon became clear that Stacy had orchestrated the entire scheme, planting false evidence and framing her own daughter in a desperate bid to evade justice. With Stacy's fingerprints found on the glass of antifreeze and multiple drafts of the note discovered on her computer, the truth could no longer be denied. Police arrested Stacy, charged with the murder of David and the attempted murder of her own daughter. Stacy's reign of terror had finally come to an end, as she was sentenced to just over 51 years in prison. And 7 years into her sentence, Stacy's life came to a sudden and unexpected end due to a hair attack, her own heart betraying her in the final moments of her existence.